The Earth in the DC universe is not the same as our Earth. It may have striking similarities on a surface level, even some real people coexisting between our world and the one in the funny pages, but at some point in history, these worlds diverged. And before you say it, no, I'm not talking about the arrival of Al, the god of superheroes, or the birth of the immortal caveman Vandal Savage, or the many, many alien or magic artifacts that have landed on their Earth over the years. No, I'm talking about a major historical event, one that even in our modern world of moral ambiguity still remains a relevant talking point even to this day. World War II. In response to the attacks on Pearl Harbor in December of 1941, the Federal Bureau of Investigation enlisted the finest masked vigilantes and superpowered marvels running around their country. A group of heroes who were already familiar with one another due to a secret club only they knew about. Jay Garrick, the college athlete turned super speedster. Alan Scott, a railroad engineer wielding the mystic Starheart. Carter Hall, archaeologist and reincarnated prince of a fallen empire. Kent Nelson, master of the mystic arts in possession of a haunted helmet. Johnny Thunder, a strapping young lad in possession of an all-powerful genie. Rick Tyler, a pharmaceutical magnate with an awesome invention. Al Pratt, a small-statured university student with a heart of gold. Wesley Dodds, a man of mystery who's haunted by prophetic dreams. And lastly, Jim Corrigan. He's an angel. Literally, the Bible's real.
You too, homeboy. I still love your bitch ass.
Giving each of them a unique mission to take down fascist and more explicitly Nazi sympathizers within the 48 states, these fine men of all shapes and sizes took an oath of blind patriotism, honoring their country and the values of the United States. You know, except for the racism. And so, the Justice Society of America was born, and the world at large would never be the same. For over 2 decades, this team and its many members existed in and out of print, acquiring new members like Wonder Woman, Batman, and of course, Superman. Acting as the world's, both in DC and in the real world's, first ever superhero team, the Justice Society paved the way for future stories and concepts that have become paramount to understanding the DC universe, and debatably comics as a whole. And then the seduction of the innocent happened. Most American comic book companies went bankrupt or were bought out and then bankrupt, and Frederick Wortham thought Batman and Robin were gay because, I don't know, a kid sleeping in the same bed as his adopted father is weird. So, changes were made, rules were put in place, and DC was encouraged to continue publishing, so long as they played ball. Now, sales for superhero comics weren't great after World War II. Around the time the seduction of the innocent happened, the most popular genres were horror or crime. The Justice Society themselves were used for propaganda in World War II, like a lot of superheroes were, for war bonds and the like. Now, without a war to fight and a lot of restrictions placed on what they can and can't do, the concept of the pulp masked hero going around fighting bad guys kind of seemed stale. Science fiction was capturing the imagination of a more hopeful, atomic age generation. So DC needed a revamp, something that took advantage of those science fiction concepts and meshed them with their colorful cast of costume characters. Enter Julius Schwartz, a sex pest, sorry couldn't help myself, and head editor at DC Comics who worked with writer Robert Kaniger and artists Joe Kubert and Carmine Infantino to revitalize their brand with their first ever reboots of their Golden Age characters. So, instead of Jay Garrick running around as the Flash, Barry Allen would put on the iconic red and yellow suit, inspired by the very same comics DC put out of Jay Garrick during the Golden Age. Alongside him came Hal Jordan, stunt pilot turned space cop under the name Green Lantern, a man without any knowledge of a Starheart or a previous man using the moniker. Now, since the internet and specialized comic book stores didn't exist in the 50s and 60s, at least not a lot of them, continuity between these stories were only ever mentioned by the odd fanzine or high school lunchroom. However, in the 1960s, Schwartz and more specifically writer Gardner Fox remembered that distinct fact about Barry Allen's past as a comic book fan, and brought up the simple question, what if the Flash met the Flash? And thus the first ever major crossover and universal shakeup in the DC universe was born, Flash of Two Worlds, which acts as both a standard crossover episode where Barry gets trapped on Jay's Earth while Jay's worst villains wreak havoc on Keystone City, but also a respectful homage to the Golden Age of comics, giving Jay a happy ending before Barry arrived, and returning him to his post as the Flash as soon as he leaves. Now, the multiverse existed before this. Robert Kanigher put it in a Wonder Woman story where she fought another Wundy, but this was the first major indication that a crossover between the Golden Age and Silver Age heroes could not just exist, but happen at any time. A grand tradition began. The newly formed Justice League of America would have a crisis, opening the doors to Earth 2 and the Justice Society whenever DC saw fit. And it didn't stop there. Batman of what we now called Earth 1 would be transported to Earth 2 and confronted with the legacy his predecessor left behind. How Dick Grayson in this world became Robin, but Robin in this context grew up. Staying Robin after Batman died, working alongside Bruce's daughter Helena Wayne as the hero Huntress, protecting Gotham from further harm. Superman of Earth 1 would be mirrored in Earth 2 by an older, kinder Superman who had his own run-in with a Supergirl in the form of Kara Zor-El. However, this Kara doesn't stay a sweet, somewhat naive teenager, instead aging up in stasis into a fully grown adult, working a day job as a software engineer as she battles evildoers as the voluptuous Power Girl. And, Marvel didn't like that name. Over time, these two worlds would build up unique points of continuity, continue to cross over and influence the growing multiverse of DC Comics, a multiverse that, while vast, was also incredibly confusing. So, in 1985, DC rebooted for the very first time. Reborn as one solid Earth, the members of the JSA, instead of being separate entities to their Earth 1 counterparts, became integral parts of the universe's history. Now, the impact of the Justice Society and their dissolution during the McCarthy trials directly inspired the next generation of vigilantes. When Superman arrived on Earth Prime, as it was called, the next generation began. Batman and eventually Wonder Woman came out of the woodwork. Barry was inspired by the exploits of Jay during World War II to don a costume of his own. Even the Guardians of Oa were somewhat aware of the mystic Starheart and its similar properties to their own magic rings. Does this make things just as confusing as, say, keeping separate characters separate? Kind of. But to me, and probably to a generation who read these stories, this is the ideal DC universe. A world where heroism is not just the norm, but a hallowed history of do-gooders across generations, people trying to make the world a better place, no matter what age they are. With the help of stellar books like Hawkworld by John Ostrander, Starman by James Robinson, Robinson's later work with David Goyer on JSA in the early 2000s, and in the late 2000s the now seminal JSA run by infamous writer Jeff Johns, the legacy of the JSA and its many characters were not only allowed to keep existing in the modern era, but praised for their exploits and impact on the greater world. Not just crossing over with the current generation, but interacting regularly as the world became darker and more chaotic, standing as an institution and a beacon of hope in a cruel, cruel world. And then, the universe was rebooted again. Only worse. A reboot caused not by one particular person, but whose credit can be given specifically to Eddie Berngaza, Dan DiDio, and especially Bob Harris.
This fucking guy again!
And while the JSA were indeed confirmed to be returning in some capacity under James Robinson and artist Nicholas Scott, it would not take place on the new Prime Earth. Instead, a dangerous and daring attempt was made to return the JSA to their own private dimension, one that would maybe cross over with the main one, if it lived long enough to see it. Our world is at war. The forces of Apocalypse have invaded, terraforming our Earth for their cruel masters. The world's heroes, its wonders, have fought and died protecting us from further harm. But instead of ending the war against Darkseid and his ruthless kin, it only served to buy us time. 5 years after the war with Darkseid supposedly ended, the fight has begun once more. Not just against Darkseid's minions and former conquerors, but new threats both man-made and older than man itself. With the world in desperate need of protection, new heroes will rise to take the original Trinity's place. Not just mutants or soldiers from the United World Army, but mystical and mighty warriors chosen amongst the common man. Will these new wonders prove to be our world's saviors? Or are they only omens of the disaster to come? This is the story of Earth 2, originally written by Eisner Award winner James Robinson. Serving as a modern reboot using many elements of DC's cosmology and deep-rooted lore, Earth 2 provided a fresh start for characters born in the Golden Age and beyond. More so than the actual reboot that took place during the New 52, it feels like a jumping-on point, as stupid as it sounds, for new readers hoping to get a fresh take on classic DC characters. Everyone has a new origin and a new purpose in the world of Earth 2. Jay Garrick is still a college-age do-gooder, but instead of being the apple of Joan Allen's eye and a track star to the stars, he's a recent graduate who was dumped by his longtime girlfriend. Searching for a purpose in his first aimless post-grad year, he's chosen by the dying god of messengers Mercury himself to be his champion on the planet Earth. Instead of following Carter Hall as Hawkman soaring through the skies, we follow Kendra Munoz Saunders, a Tomb Raider cursed by the god of war Horus to be his champion after awakening the slumbering god in his accursed tomb. And most drastic of all, Alan Scott is no longer a railroad engineer turned radio jock with a magical flame and a lantern. He's the CEO of the biggest telecommunications firm in the world, chosen by the planet Earth as its champion when him and his partner were supposed to die. A partner that caused a lot of controversy when this book first came out, given they changed Alan Scott's sexuality in this reboot. Now, I don't mind this at all on a surface level. Alan being gay? Sure. It's a new take on the character, and if they do something interesting with that change, I'm perfectly fine with it. Instead, they immediately fridged love interest Sam Zhao, using his death as motivation for Alan as the Green Lantern, and using his engagement ring as the vessel for his powers. Things do get better with the reveal that, post-mortem, Sam was the reason the train they were both on blew up in the first place, tying him into a conspiracy surrounding Apocalypse. But that's eventually undone. We'll get to that later, but for now, this is the new Alan Scott, this is the new Trinity, and these are the major players alongside the World Army's own heroes such as the Atom and the Sandmen in Earth 2. And you know what? The first 16 issues of this book ain't half bad. Robinson's major problem as a writer is overloading the page with internal monologues and exposition that we as an audience can simply understand through the art alone. I know he was praised for the work he did revitalizing the JSA in the past, and his prose can certainly be entertaining, but there are moments where I had to put the book down, rub my temples, sigh, and keep reading. But the content of the book, beyond a surface level, is really solid. The three-way conflict between the new heroes, the World Army and its internal politics, and the growing threat of Darkseid stresses the idea that this is a war that's taking place. Just like the original JSA, these characters are informed by the circumstances of their creation, and replacing a real-world conflict like World War II with a much more apocalyptic scenario is a smart move for bringing these concepts into the modern day. We still understand the gravity of the situation, but we don't need to apply real-world political knowledge or hindsight into that story. We can just focus on the characters, their internal and external conflicts, and the intricate world-building Robinson was allowed to do in a world such as Earth 2. Each character has their own motivation and goal, one we learn more about through their actions and the occasional writer's hand leading them to new villains like Solomon Grundy or Wotan. And when the war with Apocalypse finally begins properly, it does feel like everything has built up to this moment. Every subplot converges and justifies these characters doing the things they're doing. We get character development, Jay going from an aimless mama's boy to a kind-hearted and naturally born hero who's willing to put his life on the line. We see Kendra go from an outcast with wings she never wanted to a hero willing to protect her newfound friends. And we get to see Alan Scott go from the man who had everything to the man most willing to protect his planet at all costs. That, alongside a new, interesting, but wasted, semi-insane Dr. Fate, and set up for characters like Wildcat, Hourman, and even a female Red Tornado inspired by the Ma Hunkel version, establishes that this world doesn't need a new Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman. They simply needed heroes. And the heroes we have now are here to stay. At least they were planned to. After 16 issues with the book stabilizing somewhere around the 40,000 copy range, James Robinson walked away from DC Comics altogether. While little is actually known as to why he left, many have speculated it was issues with DC's editorial preventing him from using key characters, as well as the second planned Earth 2 book being changed midway through development, going from a potential proper Justice Society book into, well, the world ending. For half a year, every single week.
I can't take this shit no more, man.
By this point in Robinson's run, the war with Steppenwolf and eventually Apocalypse had already begun. Steppenwolf and his half-Amazonian daughter Fury, yes, he banged Wonder Woman. We don't know how, we don't know why, doesn't matter, let's move on. Have started their assault on Eastern Europe, the World Army already suffering a major casualty in the form of Sarge Steele, who was burned to death in a fire pit in the middle of Rio de Janeiro. One of many fire pits, I might add, created by the now head scientist of the World Army, Terry Sloan. Who fucking sucks, I'm sorry. He's set up sort of like a maker character from Marvel's Ultimate Universe. Someone doing something for their version of the greater good with knowledge most characters don't have and a purposely dickish personality meant to frustrate readers and characters alike. The only difference is that the maker is, kinda cool. And Terry Sloan is never called Mr. Terrific, his original Golden Age counterpart. It's called Agent 08, which okay. Instead, Mr. Terrific is a separate character entirely, one set up by Robinson, but an Earth Prime. He just ends up here at the end of his own short-lived series and only ever leaves at the end of the Earth 2 saga. Now you may be asking, do you need to read Mr. Terrific's solo book in order to understand this? No, it's explained in context. What about the other tie-in book starring the former Supergirl and Robin of this Earth 2, stuck on Earth Prime after their war with Apocalypse as they become Power Girl and Huntress respectively? No, because later events contradict their characterizations and stories anyways. Mr. Terrific only exists to be a smart guy that makes cool stuff to use, and I read over 80 issues of Earth 2 already to prove that this concept was doomed from the get-go. I digress. Steppenwolf releases his own private group of enforcers, the United Forces of the World Army's Wonders, and the vigilante group that heads the title, joining together to counteract Steppenwolf's armies. And while the odds are continually stacked against them, the Wonders of America helped evacuate and protect the remaining people still stuck in the crossfire, inspiring those on the battlefield fighting for their freedom, and saving those people without weapons or tools to defend themselves. And as Alan Scott flies and punches Steppenwolf, hoping to end the conflict for good, something amazing happens. He loses. Steppenwolf celebrates his premature victory, and then Brutal rips him in half! Brutal removes his helmet, declaring the Earth to be Darkseid's, and revealing Superman has been underneath the mask this whole time. This is when Robinson stepped away, the glory these heroes finally embraced being cut short, a false positive that kicks us into Act 2, and a story now led by Tom Taylor.
You can take yourself out of this existential nightmare!
Tom Taylor isn't a bad writer. Sure, he has his quirks and not everything he makes is up to snuff personally, but his work on Injustice and his current Nightwing run prove that he's willing to play with the pantheon of DC Comics, let alone the medium of comics, in fun ways. His one major Earth 2 story arc, The Kryptonian, is no exception to this. It's probably the peak of the entire comic. Which is sad, because there's over 60 issues to go. I wish I could say it gets better from here. The first major issue with Earth 2, specifically post-Robinson, is the change of focus from the pre-established trinity of Flash, Green Lantern, and Hawkwoman to a new group of characters led by one who was, yes, set up by Robinson before he left, but certainly wasn't meant to be the character he ended up being. Batman! But instead of it being Bruce, or potentially Dick as an adult, it's Thomas Wayne.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
No, this isn't Flashpoint Thomas. In Earth 2, it turns out Bruce's family was, say it with me now, connected to the Mafia. Only this time, when Thomas tried walking away from the mob life he met Martha through, a hit was put out on his family using lowlife thug Joe Chill. Surviving his bullet wounds, Thomas tells his own surgeon to fake his death so that Bruce is believed to be orphaned, taking away all future threats on his family's lives. So after years of hiding and planning his revenge, Thomas Wayne steals Miraclo, the very same drug Rick Tyler and his lineage use as Hourman, and juices routinely to enact his murder plot of the gangsters that killed his wife. Bruce finds out before it's too late, leading to him disowning his own father, but Thomas never really stopped loving Bruce despite being, a deadbeat. So for years, he would stand 50 feet away from Bruce, but always watching him, including his daughter Helena he had with the villain-turned-hero Catwoman, choosing to honor his son's legacy after he sacrificed his life to end the parademon threat on Earth. How does a former surgeon over the age of 60 keep up with superpowered 20 to 40-year-olds? Easy! He keeps juicing. And not just Miraclo, which he stole, by the way. He uses Venom! Yes! The drug Bane uses to keep up with absolutely everyone. We're supposed to believe this guy's a genius, by the way. This is bad enough, but the other new characters we follow with Thomas Wayne as one of our new leads is none other than Lois Lane, whose brain engram has been engraved into the Red Tornado robot set up several issues earlier. Forced to not only be a weapon to protect humanity, but also acting as a mentor to a new Superman, one who was kept underground by Terry Sloan and used to help construct the fire pits, who was adopted by the House of El after his radical parents were executed by the Kryptonian High Council. Val Zod. Oh hey, that's where Black Superman comes from. Val Zod's introduction in this arc works really well, and the material written by Taylor with him does work. It's just a really weird status quo change. This whole time, it was stressed that this Earth didn't need these kinds of heroes anymore. Didn't need a Batman or a Superman to really survive. That the new generation would rise to the challenge. Now we're just getting the same thing again, just needlessly different. They're also joined by the Queen of Atlantis, who they call Aquawoman, even though she doesn't like it. It's neither Arthur nor Mara, her name's Marella, but whatever. She's kinda cool, but she's also just there. Well, this arc has a great evil Superman story TM, and sets up things like Jay's godlike speed and healing factor, the return of Alan Scott from being nuked by Darkseid's forces, and a tighter, faster pace with quippier dialogue. There's still significant issues with this book starting to form. We see less and less of the original Trinity. Characters that were once significant, like Al Pratt as the Atom, lose their purpose once their arms are chopped off and are left to rot in the middle of nowhere for over 10 issues. The introductions of characters from DC's Fourth World saga, like the former star-crossed lovers Mr. Miracle and Big Barda, feel empty when their characterizations are so drastically different from their original incarnations. In short, Barda now leads the Furies, not Granny Goodness, and Mr. Terrific ends up for a short period romancing Steppenwolf's daughter Fury, which just makes the whole Fury thing even more confusing. DC editorial from back in the day claims that every version of the Fourth World characters seen in these comics are the exact same characters each time, no matter how nonsensical or contradictory it is to their current story. Inconsistent characterization is now the name of the game, and it won't stop here. And what was once the selling point, or at least an important aspect to this book, has taken a backseat to a roller coaster of never-ending action and never-ending misery. The second book that Robinson wanted to do was changed into Earth 2 World's End. What happens is exactly what it says on the label, but it's worth going into anyway. Earth 2 World's End was written by Daniel H. Wilson and Marguerite Bennett, a completely different creative team with 3 artists at any given time working on the weekly series. A series that led into an event comic that would once again change the trajectory of Earth 2, but we'll get to that when we get to it. For now, Earth 2 World's End is a miserable piece of garbage. The worst weekly comic I've ever read from the Big Two, and not for a lack of trying. There are moments where this duo of Wilson and Bennett do understand these characters, do try providing them with individual spotlight moments, such as bringing back Power Girl and Huntress from their own series and finally integrating them into the main cast. They try playing with the lore Robinson set up, like how Green Lantern gets his powers from the green, like Swamp Thing, so every other life force suddenly summons their own avatars to help combat this new threat, including Sam. You know, his dead boyfriend, who now embodies the White! It turns out it was his destiny all along to die, so he could become this avatar, as well as bring Alan Scott back to life, so he could be the wielder of the green. Hey, remember when his father told Alan at his gravestone that he was being hunted by shady people for his connections to Apocalypse? Nope. Oh, it was Terry Sloan all along? Got it. Anyways, the avatars are complete jobbers who barely get anything done. Alan at the end of the story absorbing all of their powers and becoming the true embodiment of Earth, at the expense of his own memories and individuality. But the book following this completely forgoes that until the proper third act, and then that's thrown out the window too. Shit, sorry, I'm supposed to be focusing on the positives. It's kind of hard when the focus is split between 4 different subplots at any given time, including introducing a journalist version of Dick Grayson, who has a perpetual "I lost my son" problem. Babs is here too, but she's just a cop and she dies in a refugee camp. ACAB. But hey, we finally get introduced to Ted Grant, who should be Wildcat at this point, but isn't, instead acting as a friend and mentor to Dick as he survives the crumbling world around him. This version of Dick is, well, a dick. He makes it hard to believe that this guy would ever become Batman, which the book is certainly leaning into the longer it goes on. Whatever. Our main group of heroes is now led by Thomas Wayne as the World Army scrambles to get whatever's left of humanity into spaceships Terry Sloan has been hogging in separate dimensions. The place these ships are docked in is called Adam's Haven, because the World Army conscripted now one-armed Adam to grow really big underground, killing him instantly so they could set up the necessary infrastructure for space travel. There goes a character James Robinson spent a lot of time setting up, getting us interested in through an annual, and then murdering them for the sake of a heroic death. Al Pratt is done so dirty in this book, and then they reveal, hey, Sarge Steele ain't dead! When his whole debut issue was about the fact that I have no purpose beyond the World Army. I'd kill myself if I wasn't stuck like this. Now he's back! Yay! The only World Army character you grow to actually care about is Amir Khan, a holdover from Robinson's run whose name is changed every 10 issues because, again, inconsistent writing. He dies heroically sending plans about Apocalypse to the rest of the cast. but it feels so hollow when it happens. That's kind of a running theme with World's End. Hollowness. These moments are things that sound cool, conceptually should work, but don't in execution. Huntress being kidnapped and turned into a fury for her closest friend and her disowned grandfather to fight? Cool. Only happens for 5 issues. The body modifications she underwent are completely ignored. The sudden moment that Dr. Fate breaks through their 24 issue long bout of insanity to help the rest of the group, proving that Nabu needs him just as much as him needing the helmet.
Very cool. Very cool.
The helm of Nabu is broken and then never repaired. Oliver Queen secretly being Red Arrow this whole time, stuck in a vault in the middle of the ocean with a chip that holds the DNA of every living being on Earth, hiding it from Terry Sloan specifically because he knows how much of a dick he is.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Oliver's barely a bit player after this. There's so many plot points in Earth 2 World's End that come and go, and barely build on each other as the story hurtles toward an unsatisfying ending. One that should be really cathartic given the remaining heroes left on the dying Earth fight off Darkseid one by one. Alan Scott is the one who saves the day, and then they're whisked away, into the intermission, I'd call it, between Acts 2 and 3 of this narrative. Did someone say event comic? No! Convergence was an event pitched as a battle royale between characters and places that no longer held relevance in the prime DCU. Everything from pre-crisis to post-crisis, JLI to JSA, all battling for dominance on what is effectively Battleworld, just ran by a godlike Brainiac who's ascended after the Flashpoint paradox. He put this alien guy, Telos, in charge of managing the battles, who he brainwashed after destroying his entire planet, and basically made him into a mini Brainiac with liquid metal powers. The Earth 2 heroes that were in the final battle are teleported onto the planet with no designated city, so after a brief stint as prisoners for Telos, they all go and search for allies or a way back to their own dimension. This is where Thomas Wayne and Dick Grayson team up, the two running into Alfred and a younger Bruce Wayne of no discernible universe. And for a brief moment, the book is good again. The characters have moments that feel impactful, like Dick being told by this Alfred that regardless of what dimension he comes from, he always finds his way back to the Bat. So when Thomas dies and Dick is shot in the spine mid-combat, Telos, who for some reason relates to Dick's aimlessness and gripes about failing his family, grants him temporary use of his legs again as Dick emblazons a bat symbol on his chest. I mean, he only has practical combat training and 0 strategic knowledge, but sure, he's Batman now. Neat. Meanwhile, sacrilege is being committed on the cult DC fantasy series Warlord as the main villain Deimos tries taking over the entire planet, killing the titular Warlord and angering what fanbase that book still had as the Earth 2 heroes finally unite with a bunch of other planet-locked heroes, turning the tide of battle against the coined evil characters and... Okay, I'm gonna get this out of the way. Jay Garrick runs into 2 versions of the Flash, Wally, then Barry. Never, for more than a panel, is he ever seen with the original Jay Garrick, who is here with the JSA. They never cross over. It's a character moment I was begging to see, and like all things in Earth 2, it failed to capture it. Deimos is killed by Parallax Hal, who is also here, and dooms the multiversal planet and basically the fabric of reality to shit. Brainiac descends and says, hey, you can fix this, just go back to the original Crisis and make sure the multiverse doesn't go extinct. Which the heroes do, including the ones destined to die in the Crisis, and then poof! We have the multiverse again. I thought we already had that. Reality stabilizes, the Earth Prime heroes never being involved, I might add, as Telos is tasked with returning all of these people and their cities to their prime realities with no memories of what exactly transpired. Except for Earth 2, which doesn't have a planet. So, as a thank you to Dick and pals who were helping him remember who he was before Brainiac, Telos warps the deserted planet into Earth 2's dimension, giving Alan Scott the ability to bring organic life to the husk of a world. Alan signals the arcs of humanity, the 3 million some odd people still alive, that they have a world to come back to. And that world will still be shit. Earth 2 Society is the final book of Earth 2, and given the subtitle, it implies this is where things finally come together. They do, but not without a cost. In the first arc written by Daniel H. Wilson, things immediately go back to being terrible. People are out of character, Dick has to use an exoskeleton now since his Telos powers went away, and the world is doomed to be without natural resources given the planet Telos gifted them was so alien to begin with. At least Terry Sloan dies after revealing there's some kind of traitor amongst the surviving humans. You know, the people he willingly slaughtered crashing into this planet's surface so they didn't get his secrets. When he died, I laughed. Anyways, the first arc ends with everybody's conflict with each other being resolved, the world doomed given the data chip Oliver Queen brought with him was corrupted in some way, and now the planet is covered in biomutants. Also, humanity hates the Wonders now. Great. Wilson was quickly removed from the book, and the rest of its run was handed to Dan Abnett, who kept it at a stable 20,000 copies and below before the book finally ended. For comparison, when it first launched, Earth 2 was at 68,000 copies. It dropped to the low 40s before World's End, and during World's End, the readership got sliced in half. Even readers back in the day knew that Earth 2 was a lost cause, and the only people still reading are those brave enough, or at least delusional enough, to think that somehow this will all make sense in the end. So, this sinking ship needed to be docked, and it needed to soon. Luckily, Dan Abnett wrote the aforementioned JSA tie-in to Convergence, and that's probably the best book of that whole event. Turns out, the traitor that was alluded to earlier was Ultra Humanit. Yes, I'm dead serious. He snuck on board, survived the crash, took in 20-some-odd orphans, including Dick's son Johnny, who's sometimes called Tommy because editors don't exist, I guess, genetically modified each of them into his private army, seeded doubt within the colonized city so they would go to war, and made monster mutants for the remaining Wonders to fight so he could steal an Amazonian artifact brought by Fury that has the ability of completely rewriting the world to be just as it was on their original Earth. Just like the data chip Bruce made, except magic this time. Ultra Humanit begins his assault, and Dick quickly realizes one of the orphans is his son and vice versa, who's been artificially aged up to around 15 because DC can't seem to write realistic children. Humanit takes over the mind of Alan Scott, who raids their base of operations, steals the artifact, and with the death of Oliver Queen and the interference of Fury, the artifact is used and the world is remade anew. Except, there are no superheroes. The ones who survived the blast, meaning the principal cast in the room when the artifact exploded, are trapped outside reality until they find a way to break back in. Literally, they have to break in. This is a world now ruled by Ultra Humanit from the shadows, using Wesley Dodds, the only remaining World Army Wonder, as his personal lapdog, joining with a new Sarge Steel and freeing Alan, who Ultra Humanit was keeping as his secret weapon underground. The Wonders defeat this shadowy dictatorship permanently by killing Ultra Humanit, and doing a fake-out death for Dick, which doesn't work at all. We end our story with Earth 2 being in relative peace. Power Girl and Val Zod are seemingly in a relationship again. They had issues back when Wilson was writing. Huntress has become Batman, with Johnny as her superpowered Robin. Jay, Alan, and Kendra remain close friends and allies who meet weekly with this team they consider their family. And last but certainly not least, Dick Grayson becomes Oracle, acting as the leader and information dispenser for the new Justice Society. There may never be true peace on this Earth, or for this dimension, but the Justice Society will protect us all, no matter what happens. The end.
Please clap.
What a genuine mess of a book. I do like some moments even outside of Robinson's initial setup. Convergence was a neat surprise from Jeff King and Scott Lobdell of all people. Some of Society's conflicts were interesting, like Jimmy Olsen ascending to godhood, which I completely neglected to mention because it barely mattered in the end, or the reveal Val Zod helped make the fire pits. However, World's End ruined this book for most people. If I wasn't reading this for a retrospective, I would have also tapped out. So what happened to Earth 2 after this point? Nothing. The original JSA were restored in the main timeline after DC Rebirth, Scott Snyder reintroducing them before Jeff Johns started a small pop-up imprint called the New Golden Age. And the characters of the Earth 2 reboot have either been forgotten to time, or Val Zod, who occasionally shows up in other books like The Adventures of John Kent. That's it. If this book's declining relevance and complete buffoonery has proven anything, it's that fans truly do love the JSA. When Jay Garrick was first teased in The Button by Tom King and Joshua Williamson, it was pure hype fuel. Waiting for Doomsday Clock to return the universe to a sense of normalcy was a highlight of my regular comic book reading teen years. And it's weird, since I never grew up with any of these characters, only the ones they inspired. Why is that? It's simple. More than anything, the JSA represent the values and best qualities of the DCU. Hope even in your darkest hour, the unification of empowered people from across the world, a growing roster of familial legacies and friendships alike, and of course, the unique link to its world's history, a world that makes much more sense with them in it than without. I hope Earth 2 gets touched on again, not in a huge crisis that destroys their universe, but on a small scale. I like these incarnations a lot despite my misgivings, and like any good comic book fan I know, it just takes one creative team to turn a bad concept into something special. Read Earth 2 if you want. I left a lot of plot threads out of the video so you can discover them for yourselves. It may be a slog and maybe one of the worst books you've ever experienced, but the ride is kind of worth it. Kind of. Or just read the John Scoyer JSA run. Probably your safest bet. Thank you for watching.